TCSTV viewers, it's Evelyn coming to you live from the camera store, and I will be your host tonight. And we're very thrilled to offer you how to make everywhere and anywhere your photo studio with Nicole Ashley. And this event is sponsored by Canon Canada. So if you've registered for this event, we're actually going to be sending you an email with some special offers that we're not able to list online or tell you about right now. But if you want to get in on that and you didn't register, then you can send me an email to evelyn@thecamerastore.com, and we'll be happy to add you to that special list for Canadian shoppers. There's also a bunch of work happening behind the scenes tonight to make all of this happen, and that's especially thanks to our TCSTV live dream team. Tonight we have Drew and Graham in the house working with us, and of course we always have Riley handling communications. And part of what I love about doing live streams the most is being able to interact with all of you and to be able to ask our guests questions. So I hope all of you will feel comfortable putting your questions, comments, oohs and ahs, all that good stuff into the comments tonight. But if you want to participate and you're not logged into YouTube, you can also just email me your questions to evelyn@thecamerastore.com, and I'll be happy to make sure that we get to both of those. And so if you're not familiar with our guest tonight, she's an international portrait and wedding photographer, and she's actually almost local. She's based about 3 hours north of us in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and her influence has branched out far beyond the boundaries of her city, bringing her throughout much of Canada. And she also does a lot of international destinations that she's telling me about. She gets to do some really cool stuff, but she's shot in Iceland, Italy, Switzerland, Australia, and lots of just amazing places. And she has an impressive resume photographing weddings, portraits, boudoir, a little bit of everything, but I would say a lot of her work really surrounds photographing people and making these magical moments happen. And so I would like to welcome Nicole Ashley. Thanks so much for joining us tonight on TCSTV Live.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I mean, that was a great intro. But yeah, I've been a professional photographer for over 10 years now, and I'm grateful that I still love it. And lately, I've really been into education and working with Canon and being an ambassador and mentoring students. And it really is the dream career.
Well, that's fantastic. Did you want to share your screen?
Yes, I will get that ready for you here. I've made up a keynote for you guys so that we can look at everything together. And I'm going to share that now. So I've already been given a lovely intro. And for those of you who follow the camera store or perhaps Canon, but you don't know a lot about me, like I said, I've been shooting professionally for over 10 years, and I've hosted a few of my own workshops, and I've worked with Canon and the camera store previously to do some. So I just want to say that the fact that you're here means that you are invested in learning and growing your business, or perhaps you're just picked up a camera the other day and you want to get started. So either way, the fact that you're here, that's an awesome sign that you care about photography and you're either looking to grow or stay seasoned. So thanks for being here. Before I get into everything, I just want to show you a bit of my portfolio. So I'm going to let them play a slideshow for you.
I hear the sound echoes beneath, angels and skylines meet, and I'm straining to reach the light on the surface, light on the other side. I feel the pages turning, I see the candle burning down before my eyes, before my wild eyes. I feel you holding me tighter, I cannot see. When will we finally breathe? pages turning, I see the candle burning down before my eyes, before my wild eyes. And I feel you holding me tighter, I cannot see. When will we finally breathe?
Oh, that was so awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in your style of photography?
Thank you. Yeah, so I think it's really important to talk about how people got to where they are, because it's not really a paved path for creatives of how you get into something. There are a lot of schools now that you can attend to for photography, but to be honest, there wasn't really when I started. I actually went to university to be a teacher, and that's where I met my boyfriend, now husband. And while I was in my teaching degree, I was shooting on the side for fun, but I never would have dreamed that it could be anything professional or I could do anything with it. And I used to share a little bit on social media, and eventually I kept getting people asking if they could hire me. This was back when it was just like Facebook. And John really encouraged me, he's my boyfriend, now husband, to quit my serving jobs and all the other jobs I was trying to do while waiting for a teaching job to come along, and give my 100% to photography for like 6 months and just see if we made any money from it. And if I didn't make $1 after that, that we would like reevaluate and just maybe just pursue just teaching. And within months, I was fully operating as a paid photographer. And now I've been self-employed, like I said, 10 plus years. So I think there's probably a lot of people watching here that perhaps are still working a full-time job, or they're working part-time and they want to make photography full-time. Just know that anybody who is full-time, we've all had different paths getting into it, and they don't all look the same. And just because you work a part-time job, or maybe you're working full-time and just doing photography on the weekends, doesn't mean you're not a photographer. So I think there's a lot of power in switching your mindset with that, and knowing that even if you have all these other, what you would determine as roadblocks, that you can still get to the point of being full-time if that's what you want. So yeah, I was very lucky that I had a partner who was super supportive in pushing me in that direction. Because I think for a lot of people, myself included, when I told others that I wanted to be a photographer, it was kind of like, why would you want to do that? Or like, oh, everyone's a photographer. So I was really lucky I had someone in my corner really amplifying that dream for me. So if you don't, I'm sorry, but I highly recommend you joining some Facebook groups or reaching out to other artists and trying to connect with them, because I think especially in Alberta, we have a really, really positive and well-connected group of supportive artists. And I find that, I'm sure there's competition around, but like everybody is really good about supporting one another. So if you're in a place where you're trying to be an artist and you're not there yet, or you're trying to be full-time as an artist and you're not there yet, I highly recommend reaching out over social media to different groups, or the camera store offers classes like this and stuff all the time. I know Canon's really great about offering lots of support and education opportunities. So I'm really grateful all of these things exist now. I wish it did when I started, but again, I was so lucky to have someone really supportive in my corner. And here's John with Blanche. So a cool thing about our journey, I guess, is that, so we both went to university to be teachers. When we finished our degrees, I pretty well went into photography like right away, and he taught for a while. And he was always a creative person himself, and seeing me do that shift and take that leap of faith, so to speak, he was encouraged to do the same. And he's been a full-time tattoo artist now for, I think, over 6 years. So quite a while. So yeah, it's pretty cool that we were able to make that switch. So anyone, because I talked to photographers of every age. I just did a mentorship with someone who's 46, and she's had a couple kids, and she's like, I keep being drawn to photography, and I'm like, you can still do it. Like, don't let any of that stuff be a roadblock. So that's just a little bit about us. And over the pandemic, we had a baby. Shocker. I think a lot of people did. And now that I'm a mom, I'm very particular about what I take on. I value my time so much more. I'm sure there's a lot of seasoned artists watching that have either gotten to burnout or like approaching burnout, and they know what I'm talking about. So finding that balance is so important. For me, it took having a little one to get there, but now I'm trying to navigate that better now. So long-winded, but that's a little bit about my history. So aside from the freedom of creating my own schedule and traveling the world for work, I also get to work with my best friend almost every other day. This is Jana. Anyone who follows my account has probably seen her pink hair somewhere. She's a professional hair and makeup artist. She's actually working in Sri Lanka right now for a wedding, which is wild.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she's super encouraging. When clients hire me, they automatically want to hire her. So they see us traveling a lot together. We work a lot, obviously, here in Alberta and over Canada. But aside from Jana too, I've surrounded myself with an amazing group of creatives, everything from hair and makeup artists to designers, painters, florists, you name it. I think working with other creatives is so important and so invigorating to your career. So that's another thing. If you haven't reached out to other vendors or tried to collaborate with other artists, I think that's a really needed opportunity that every artist should have.
Yeah, I think it's a very underestimated aspect of portrait photography in particular, to create that cohesiveness, right, within your own work.
Yes. Yeah, I'll stop that boomerang now. Yeah, and I think especially if you're new, it can be really scary to reach out to vendors and try to collaborate. But I'd love to remind artists of wherever stage that you're at that florists, wedding planners, musicians, anyone in like wedding industry or even portrait industry, they want photos too, and they want to work on new and interesting projects too. So it never hurts to ask, instead of just being scared of no. Like, you'll never know unless you try. And if all of that wasn't reason enough to love my job, or to hopefully encourage anyone else there to love their job and get into photography. As a wedding photographer, I get to be a part of the most intimate and happiest day for strangers. And I get to create art for a living and help people by giving them images they get to cherish for the rest of their life. So I don't take that lightly, even though I don't take myself too seriously. I don't take that lightly. So that's a pretty cool aspect of the job. So my main focus of work is weddings and portrait work, as you probably saw from that portfolio slideshow. But what I'll talk about today should apply to most photographers. Destination work in general forces me to create studios everywhere. And with this workshop, I'm going to talk about how to work with the spaces you're given and how to transform others into what you want them to be. So I'm not too sure how many people here have their own studio, which is obviously such a luxury, or renting studios. But the main part of this workshop that I want people to take away with is that you don't need to have one in order to be successful. That really, you can do this anywhere and everywhere. And again, stop me, Evelyn, at any time if you have a question or anything popping up. I tend to just keep going, but it's not interrupting.
Sounds good.
So before I dive into everything, I want to talk about probably a lot of the stuff you're curious about, which is equipment. This is the good stuff. This is like my must-haves for shooting. Now, to be honest, this is like this photo's a bit older, but it was just too cute not to share because Blanche was in it. And let's be honest, flat lays are hard. So lining up lenses and everything like that, I was like, I'm gonna keep this photo. So what's not pictured here in this photo is the Canon R5 body. That's my like newest and latest love. So it's a mirrorless camera. The RF 70 to 200, the 2.8, the RF 50, the 1.2, and I just got the RF 50 tilt shift, which is like, it's also a macro lens as well. That's really cool. If you're familiar with my work, I use the 45 millimeter tilt shift a lot, which it's not a popular lens. And to be honest, I don't know if you can even get that one anymore, but the one that I got replaced that. And tilt shift is so fun. And it's how I get a lot of those really dreamy, cool sun flare photos. So I get lots of questions on those photos, but you know, you can have access to the new version of that lens. And there's other tilt shift focal lengths as well. But I always shoot with 2 camera bodies, so I still love my my Mark IV. It was a big difference for me going from the Mark III to the Mark IV, but I still love the Mark IV, and on that one, I would pretty well always have my 50 on. But now the combo of mirrorless R5 with the 50 1.2 is like chef's kisses. It's so dreamy. It's so good. So those are the 2 main bodies that I use. And then obviously depending what I'm shooting, like weddings, I use like telephoto lenses. If I have more time, then I'll bust out like a tilt shift. But then I do also have flashes. Also, what's not pictured here is that I got the ProPhoto A10 light and the new ClickBox softbox. So I'm in a new place where I'm trying to like experiment with lighting as well. Most of my portfolio is like natural light, but yeah, aside from here, also like I'll play with prisms and obviously different backdrops or ring lights when needed. But basically like everything that I have or whatnot that I use, you can get at the camera store.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions here that have popped up. So from Trish Gabriel, what's the first good lens a beginner should invest in? I'm assuming if we're talking about portrait photography, what would you suggest? And what was your first lens?
So I would rent lenses at first because I still remember like my first like real photo shoot was a band photo shoot for my husband's band. He used to be a musician for hire. And I was so nervous for that shoot. I actually threw up the morning of that shoot because I was so nervous for it. And I went to a camera store and I was like, I'd like to buy a fisheye lens. And they were like, why? And it was just something I had read about in a magazine. Like I had no idea what I was talking about. And they actually talked me out of it, which I appreciate now. And they told me that I should rent lenses and see what I like first and what I use the most before I purchase, because they are an investment. They are expensive for good reason. So after renting lenses for quite a bit, shooting a multitude of different things, the 24 to 70 2.8 was my first lens that I like purchased and was mine. And I think that's a great lens because it has zoom and it has a great focal length. It's a great learning lens, and I still love that lens. So that's a good one.
It's a very popular one too. So I think a lot of people agree with you.
Yeah.
The other thing is, where did you get that awesome strap from? The camera strap. That was a question from Kate.
Yes, those are Holdfast Moneymaker straps. So they're amazing. I've had them for 9 years and they're still in perfect working condition. You can get real leather, vegan versions of them. Holdfast is like an amazing company out of the States. I've done a few workshops and all over, and they've been like vendors there too. So I've gotten to see a lot of their other products, and they make like lots of leather goods. But those ones are really great because the way they crisscross on your back, they really support your back. So especially when you're carrying heavy gear all day and the lenses are different focal lengths, so it's like not evenly weighted distributed gear on your back, it like will save you from feeling like a good train wreck the next day.
Cool.
And they look cool too.
It does look really cool. Yeah, we'll have to look into seeing if we can bring those in. We have quite the strap selection at the camera store, but we don't have that one.
Yeah. And you know what? So I've asked to be like an ambassador for other camera straps. And just out of curiosity, I entertained a few and I tried out a few because I was like, oh, I've had the hold fast ones forever. Like maybe there's something better. I've never tried anything that comes close to those ones. So if you're looking to bring those ones in, they're like, I mean, mine are still in perfect condition so many years later.
Cool, that's awesome. All right. Yeah, I think that's it for gear questions right now, but I'll let you get to it.
Okay. Yeah, if you have gear questions throughout, or if you want to know what something's shot with, just ask in the chat and we can get at that for you. Let's talk about light. So proper gear with the proper use of light is really where the magic happens, because light is a storyteller. It truly is everything when it comes to photography. And this is a good example of like using a tilt shift lens. This is where you can get all those really cool, crazy flares, and you can see like that the lens is like tilted in here. Because I know someone's going to be like, well, show me an example. So whether you're new or you're seasoned, it's so important to look for light when you're shooting and to understand it. The key is to play with your equipment and learn about its abilities and the boundaries of your equipment and what works with your style before you actually work with real clients. Because some artists lean to bright and airy, some lean to more like darker and moodier, and they like to experiment with the dark. So, you know, if you have certain camera gear, you can push it so far, whereas other camera gear cannot. And this would also be great questions to ask, you know, Canon or the camera store about certain aperture settings and things like that, because that will all affect the outcome of your work too. Understanding the light allows you to control the mood of your sessions and the story, and using it properly allows you to direct your viewers' feelings and emotions. So it's really important to get a good grasp on lighting and like where your gear can play a role and how it can do that. Some artists prefer all natural light, and some are only studio light. Like I said, I'm dabbling in both. Most of my portfolio is all natural, but lately I've been dabbling in both, and I do like this new sense of control with light. So I'm sure you'll see more of it in my portfolio. I like not having limitations.
Do you ever use any natural light modifiers like reflectors in your work?
I do. I also have used, you know, like I have like nice fancy reflectors. I have V flats, which is like something I just got like not long ago, that I want to share about. I'm not sure if you've heard about those before. Mm-hmm. But I've even in a pinch, if I've been somewhere, I've had to use like a white sheet to bounce light off of, or I've been with like an assistant or somebody wearing a white shirt, and I'll get them to come stand to just like bounce a bit of like light in an area that I need. So that's the great thing, is that like once you understand lighting, you can even see things that are around you, that if you're in a pinch and you need something else, that you can supplement it a different way. But I like now using professional lighting as well, because I like not having limitations, and it forces my creativity in a different way. And if you're comfortable with only natural light, like that's totally fine. If you're in an indoor space, all you need is one window, just one. And it doesn't matter how big it is. Like if you have one window, you can create magic. But of course, if you're outdoors, you have to know how to control it. So even this example here, this is the same model, and she was just turned further away from the window to create more of a dramatic look. And the more you understand lighting, the more you can control, even just with your subject and the same light, a different outcome.
Okay.
So all
Another
you need is
question
that
here
little
from
slip.
Tristina is, do you ever use tripods for your work?
I do. But only recently with using like a ring light if I need, or with using like the A10 Pro Photo light. Before that, like using a tripod for my camera, no. I it was one of the first things I bought too, just because I was like, oh, I'm going to be a photographer. I should buy a
You need a
tripod.
tripod.
And then I never, I never used it. But I know people who do like night photography or different styles of shooting, or even people who are smart enough to use a tripod during like family photos, during the wedding portion, like family photos. Then they don't have to like crop and straighten after. So like there's good uses for it. I I only use it for like the lighting or backdrop stuff. So yeah, again, indoor, you only need one window. Outdoor, as long as you can control it, then you're good. But it's important to understand what to do if there's too much of it. So, so many people shoot when it's like, they're like, oh, great, it's going to be sunny. And I'm like, that is my
That
nightmare.
is the
Like,
worst.
I don't want that. So this is a good example. I was shooting a wedding in Italy and it was super bright, and this was in an outdoor villa, and to achieve this look, because I still wanted, even though it was super bright, I still wanted it to have more of a moodier effect, which is very much so my style. I had the client turn to the light source and I underexposed the image, which is really important to know if you want to retain sky detail. um, you know, you can typically bring back detail if it's blown out, but if you expose perfectly or overexpose your shoot, then it's gone forever. So understanding lighting if you're working with outdoors and your like studio is outside is really important. Okay, so now that I've gotten through some important factors when it comes to photography, I'd like to move on to today's focus, which is how anywhere and everywhere can be your studio. I think there's this like unsaid pressure when you become an artist to have your own studio space, or at least I know that when I started and I felt comfortable enough or confident enough to say that I was a photographer, one of the first questions people would ask me like, "Oh, like where's your studio? Or you have a studio?" And I was like, "I have a bedroom in my townhouse." So it was like it was like really intimidating to get that over and over again. So I think it's important to talk about, because I don't want people to feel intimidated or like they're doing something wrong or they're not successful if they don't have a studio, because that is not the case. Um, so don't feel defeated if you do. I'm grateful that I had to learn how to create my studios on the fly or no matter where I was in the world, because I do think it's made me a stronger artist. Don't get me wrong, like if you have the space and the overhead makes sense for you in your business, that's awesome. Just want to let you know that if you don't, like that's okay. Um, so I'm going to showcase like why you don't like necessarily need one, and detail a few things like that. So those of you who've been perhaps following me for a while maybe would have seen my characters project. So it was a project that I did a few years back, and I used to photograph tons of different people, and I would kind of have like an assignment for them. So I would ask them to give me two words to describe themselves, and whether or not I knew them previously or I knew a little bit about them, I had to photograph them in less than 5 minutes in these like often impromptu shoots. And to keep the technical aspect the same for me, or as like easy as possible, I shot them all in black and white, and I would just find a dark background. So sometimes I would use hotel doors. I've used a black t-shirt. I've used black photo paper. Like I've actually like traveled with black photo paper, to keep the look consistent. But the goal was to get myself to feel comfortable photographing strangers in random places. So it's kind of like a bit of shock therapy of being like forcing myself to be super uncomfortable. But it was a really great challenge and a really good creative project for me. And I do think that also made me a stronger artist, because it forced me to adapt to different lighting scenarios, to get over my like own anxiety about photographing strangers, and it was a really fun and cool project, and I'm glad I did it. So based off of what they would tell me, off their 2 words, and I would usually seek out like artists, small business owners, or like interesting characters that I knew of for this project. I would create different portraits of them. And it was like a really fun project that I totally want to start up again, because it introduced me to a lot of like really interesting people too. But it's just cool to look at these photos and be like, oh, I shot that in Belize, or that was in New York, that was in Edmonton, that was wherever at different workshops. And it was just a really fun project. But if you look at these photos, they all look like they're in like some sort of studio. If you analyze them, you can tell that they're not, and the lighting is all over the place for it. But it was really good practice for me to kind of like make my own studio space anywhere and everywhere, essentially. So I thought that was important to share. Oh, I'm just gonna get back in here. Oh, sorry guys. So yeah, so the characters project was something that I really loved doing, but I'm also going to show you where I think a lot of people are probably starting off if they don't have a studio space. So this was in my old townhouse. I've moved since then, but we were in a very small house and I couldn't afford a studio, so I wanted to create one. So as you can see, this is like super small room, just one window, blank walls, not much to go off of. So we put up a faux brick wall and made a custom Murphy bed so that I could have the option of flipping up the bed if it was just portraits, or flipping it down if it was like boudoir or like couples photos. And it would give me like a little bit more space. And I eventually turned it into this. So I added a ceiling light, did a lot of painting, added a mirror. I would change the bedding to switch up the shoot. Put in a lot of plants. And even the light, it was like a silver light. I painted it black. And then obviously having the faux brick gave the studio look to it. And I would hang like different twinkle lights and change out my pillows often to like switch up the look. But yeah, it was not easy by any means, but I did that with just like a blank canvas. So I think a lot of people look at having just like a bedroom in their house and thinking like, well, it doesn't look like a studio, but you can add all these elements yourself and make them look like a studio. So another example is this was like an old living room. And I wish I had the before shot of it, but it just had a blank empty wall. And we were doing renovations upstairs. So I had a shoot booked and I was like, okay, I guess I could do it in the living room and we could just like move things around. This TV was so heavy, but I moved everything off that wall, and I knew that I needed to use that one window in the corner there and make it look like a studio space. And I turned it into this. So I actually moved all of the furniture, blew up an air mattress, set up like a little nook and styled it. And this shoot was actually shot in September. So it wasn't Christmas, but I wanted to have the portfolio ready for Christmas. So I had to make it look Christmassy. So I even put up the Christmas tree, put on all the Christmas lights, hung up stockings. The Christmas tree alone was a lot of work itself. But I even made hot chocolate and marshmallows and hung lights and all of that so that I could create this shoot for that season. You can even see over by the hot chocolate, there's like a Mariah Carey Christmas album. So
the details.
Details. And even the presents under the tree, like wrapped presents, those are all like cereal boxes and granola boxes. So I was like, you have to put something under the tree. So it was a lot of definitely a lot of work, but so worth it for the outcome. so it's just so important for people to see this, because I think they look at these and they think, well, like, well, yeah, that's so cool. You have access to this space. But the before photo, that's like a couch and it's just like a living room. So like anybody can do these things. It's just takes a bit of work. um, so this is a more elevated version of that too. So this was just an empty space. This is a warehouse that sadly doesn't exist anymore in Edmonton. But we styled everything. So literally it was just the wall, the windows, and the floor. And I was working with Janine from Fabulosity. She's an amazing floralist here in Edmonton, and Jana from Behind the Blush. And between us, we set up the bed. We brought all this stuff from home, bringing up all these pillows. I brought artwork from home. We hung this light with a ladder. And even the cardboard boxes, I went to my mom's work and got all these cardboard boxes to make it look like the couple was just moving in. Again, so much work, but it became like one of my favorite shoots. So I originally was supposed to photograph this couple when they first moved together in their place in Boston. But then last minute, he got relocated to Texas. And with the move and everything, we kind of missed out on that opportunity. So they ended up coming to Edmonton, and we fell in love with the idea of showing them move in together. So we still wanted to like honor that. So we set it up like in this loft with some of their items too, and kind of recreated what we had planned originally. But it turned into a really great shoot. And as you can see, we made lots of use of the space, and we moved around lots. We captured lots of different angles, which is so important because it'll increase your variety of images and be able to tell a better story. But if you would have seen, this is just an empty space that we just styled to look more like a studio space.
So what kind of lighting would you have used in a space like this when you have some natural light coming in, but it looks like, you have just the one source? What else did you use?
So for this is a good example of a shoot that was all natural light, but occasional reflectors. So on the third image, I bounced a bit of light to get more detail in his face. So we had a reflector kind of down by her knees where I just cropped it. But everywhere else, like the windows were so big, which was great. And because of the white brick wall that bounced so much light itself, it created like really beautiful light. So only natural and reflectors for this one.
Awesome.
And this one's on my website, and just for the sake of time, I won't go through it, but you can go to my website if you want to see the rest of those photos. This is another good example of, so these clients, they bought their first home and they had just started fostering this cat. And we joked about doing like a cat photo shoot because I'm a little cat crazy. And they were like, well, let's make it like about like your house too, like how you bought a house, because that's a big deal as well. And we made the studio space their kitchen. So normally when they're in their kitchen and they're cooking, they're actually faced the other way, so the opposite way of their island. But in order to document it properly for lighting, they had their windows obviously facing them the way they are in this photo. So I just flipped them around for better light. But this is all shot with natural light too. And again, like you can literally go to a client's home, and as long as you have a window or two, then you can create beautiful photos like right in their space, which can make clients feel really comfortable too. I find, especially if it's like couples photos, sometimes it's like more awkward for them to like show up to a studio space. So it's just another win that you can offer to go to them and photograph them in their space. And yeah, their kitchen became their studio. And every time we were trying to like make toast to like make this like super cute spread, their cat kept eating the toast. I would like literally run away with toast. But it was like a super cute thing that like added to their story.
Well, that's awesome. We had a question a little bit earlier, and maybe this is a good time to touch on it. But when you're deciding what you're going to shoot these indoor spaces with, and in this particular case, we're looking at the toast picture that has a very shallow depth of field, so the background's very soft and it's just popping off the frame. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is to you to shoot with like a full frame camera? You're using the R5, and also what it means to use a lens that will allow a lot of that natural light through.
Yeah, so obviously if you're able to shoot full frame, you're going to have so much more flexibility in what you can do. And I love shooting like 1.2, that like I'm like really shallow depth of field. If you'll see in any of my photos, like I almost never go up to like 2.8, only if I'm like getting into more family stuff. So I have to be strategic on where I place my focus points. It's always on, I mean, here it's obviously on the bread, but when it's like a couple, like I'll be focusing on like his eye, or like I guess in this shot I'm focusing on the cat, and then they're kind of blurry. But typically if it's the couple, then I'll focus on like one of their eyes or their hands, or sometimes I'm very intentional about it being like a collarbone or a shoulder, depending on where I want the viewer's eyes to go. But yeah, I mean, I still love my Mark IV, but I just love how fast and it's just like freer to have the mirrorless. I don't know how to better explain that. I use both for different reasons, but I like playing with the mirrorless so much more.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for focal length, I mean, I don't think you'll see anywhere in my portfolio that's anything that's like above 2.8. But you have to be careful because if you're just starting out, it's very easy to misfocus. Like even a strand of hair going over someone's eye could, make you miss your focus. So it does force me to slow down and be very intentional with shooting.
Definitely. Well, I'll do a shameless plug that if you're not familiar with what she's saying in terms of it being mirrorless, or going back to DSLR full frame, if that's a little bit of mumbo jumbo, then definitely come talk to us. You can call us at the camera store or just pop in, and we can show you what we mean with some of this different gear. I know there was a couple of questions earlier about how important it is to choose the camera, or is it just the lens that makes a difference? It's kind of a combination of both. So definitely chat with us. We'd be happy to help no matter where you are. There's also another question here from Deb asking about what ISO do you use if you're only shooting with natural light? Does that affect the ultimate size of the prints that you're able to do in respect to noise?
So it's important to do print tests when you kind of find your sweet spot of where you're shooting. And I definitely have done that. I do have lots of clients that print their photos, so it is important for me to be aware of that. Obviously, that's a big push for me to shoot with like the latest and newest bodies, because you can push ISO so much more than, I mean, the difference of the Mark III to the Mark IV even was wild, of like how much I could push the ISO and still have like fairly like noise-free photos. But it's kind of a combination of your settings too, like being aware of what your shutter speed is at. I try to keep my ISO in all situations as low as possible, just because it is kind of like fake light to me, like it's adding noise to your photo. So I mean, in all scenarios, I try to keep it as low as possible. And then if I find that I'm pushing my camera, getting near to like 2000, even then I'm kind of like, I should add some like artificial lighting. And even then, like I know I could still go way higher and get like a pretty like sharp, clean image if it was to be blown up. But you never know. Some of my couples photos have been sold as book covers, or like you never know, something could be like a billboard, or like you just don't want to like test fate. So I think if you're even starting to get a bit nervous about it, add in artificial lighting.
Keep it low, keep it low.
Yeah, so I'll kind of, and again, just let me know if a question pops up or whatnot. But again, I have the link here just for time's sake. Feel free to go on my site and check it out if you want to see. You'll see lots of different examples of like clients at home and whatnot on there. This is another great example if you're on location and styling before and after. So myself and my team were working in Portland, and we thought it would be a good backup spot to shoot in this bathroom. So we were shooting other work in Portland, and then our clients only had one day to shoot. Our trips kind of overlapped. They're actually from Calgary, and they wanted somewhere like a destination to have their engagement photos. But of course, on this one day that we had, it was raining. So the night before, we were like kind of scattering, being like, should we rent a studio? What should we do? And we're like, no, like we'll just use somewhere in our Airbnb, because they were in a small hotel room that they didn't want to shoot in. So of course, before I just like did it on the day of, we were like, let's just, maybe we could do like a cute like bathtub scene or something, like them like brushing their teeth or like getting ready during the day and in the bathroom. So we styled it with like all these different plants and knickknacks, and Jana put her robe in there for like some color and texture. And a fun fact about me is I always travel with twinkle lights. I have like a weird obsession with like making sure I have like extra lighting, even if I'm just traveling for me. Like if I go to a hotel room, I always have twinkle lights or like anything like that, just to like make it feel more homey. So I threw my twinkle lights in there. But again, like it was a lot of work, but it was also fun. We didn't end up having to use the cleared up enough for us to shoot outside, but it was even just fun, like styling a nook and seeing what we were capable of, like putting our brains together. But yeah, you would never look at the first photo and think that it could be this unless you like try it. So even after I've done this, I've shown this to students before, and they've shown me before and after they've done a shoot in their own bathroom, styling it. So that's really cool. And it just shows like the limitations are like really only what you put in your brain of like what's possible when it comes to like shooting a studio space. And again, I really want to encourage you that to like offer to shoot at other people's homes. Obviously, if you're like safe and you like know them enough, you know, be smart. Because when you are on location in their space, they're so much more comfortable than if they like meet you somewhere foreign to them. And if it is at yours, then a lot of work needs to be put into place to make them feel comfortable. So when I have clients in my studio space now, I always make sure that I have music playing, that the temperature is good. I sneakily try to find out what music they like before and play that just to like get them extra comfortable. You know, pre-COVID, like now, like, you know, it's a weird thing. I'm trying to figure out, like, is it safe to do this? I have like food and refreshments out for them. So like now I'm like, are you comfortable with taking this stuff? But yeah, I'll have like candles. I treat it as if like I'm hosting a friend. And I find that goes a long way, making people feel comfortable and like making it more like a studio space, even if it is a small bedroom with one window. But if you're on location, there's things that you can look for to like make it into your studio space as well. Biggest thing if you're on location somewhere, if it's public, is just not letting your own nerves get the best of you. So for example, this was at the airport, which obviously there's tons of people walking around and watching you and just staring. So you immediately are like, just start sweating because people are going to judge me. But just having the confidence in shooting in a public space is so important. Obviously, if it's the airport, you have to get permission. Just going to throw that out there, which we did. This was for like a fashion company. But don't be afraid to get the shot with permission. If it's a public space, and don't let yourself like get in your own head about it. That's like half the battle. In locations, if you're outdoors, like it's truly like you can make beauty out of anything. You know, these are some weeds that I thought looked like pretty flowers. And after I told the florist that I was like, oh, this, like, I love these like flowers by her feet. And they were like, those are weeds, yeah. I was like, oh, okay. I think it's beautiful. I love showing this example because this looks like a beautiful like field full of flowers. And when I took the couple to this location, I had to preface them like, you have to trust me because this location is literally behind a big garbage bin that I just saw driving by one day. So if you show up to the shoot, like there's off to the side, there's this huge garbage bin, and there's like lots of patches of dirt and like a dirt hill on the other side and like commercial building. But this little nook itself, it looks like a field of flowers. So it's really important to like look for beauty in all areas because you never know what you'll find. And obviously have clients that trust you because they might look at the spot and be like, okay. I usually show them in camera what I'm doing, just to be like, it's fine. This photo here, this was behind a 7-Eleven. It smelled really bad. So for sure, someone had like urinated not far from it, but it was so worth it. I had again driven by this spot several times, and I think they're called silver willow trees. They're like huge and beautiful and have more of that like silvery sage color. Um, and I really loved it. And I had been driving by it one day, and the sun was setting like off to the side. So I was like, oh, I just want to put like a person right there. So I had the opportunity to do that for the shoot, and same thing. I had to be like, please trust me. I know it's kind of gross, but it'll be fine. And it
It'd
was
be
worth it.
beautiful.
Yeah.
um,
This
we
is
we have
a
a
good
burning
example.
question. Can I ask you one?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So there's a question here from Jackie. Very curious about how much editing do you do with your photos, or do you rely solely on adjusting your settings in camera? If you do edit, what software are you using?
So for editing backgrounds, not a whole lot. So like for that previous, like I wasn't editing things out of that photo, or like when I try to find these like magic little corners or nooks, I look for stuff that's not going to be taking up too much work with editing. Don't get me wrong, I do put a lot of retouching and editing into clients when it comes to like their skin or anything like that. But into the location, I try to make that work for me so that a lot of my time isn't eaten up like editing like buildings out or anything like that. But I mostly use Lightroom, but I definitely use a bit of Photoshop when I need to, if I like really have to manipulate an image. But I try to keep most of my work to Lightroom. But that after saying that, now like of course I have like a dramatic before and after that I'm gonna show. So I had learned that I was pregnant while away on a destination wedding, and I was with Jana, so I was like, let's like take a photo so I can like use it eventually for when I'm feeling comfortable enough to share that I'm pregnant. So we were looking around everywhere, and just because it's a maternity photo or like a baby bump photo, it didn't feel right to show like all the epic mountains with like me holding my like really what's a food belly there, like just like Italian pasta or whatever
Cool.
in there.
Mini bump.
um yeah, but we found this wall, and it was the tiniest little wall, but I loved the vines and the leaves going up it and the texture in it. So in this photo, I did edit out the post, and then shot it with a tilt shift, but I knew that we could make it into like a really cool photo. But if somebody were walking by and they were like, what are you doing? And you were to say like, oh, I'm shooting a maternity photo, they would look at that other spot. Oh, let me just go back. Oh, hang on. And think that that was like such a not a cool spot. So yeah. Sorry, I'm just gonna go back here. Oh, sorry. Just give me 1 second here. Maybe you can ask me a question while I try to go
Yeah,
back.
there's another question actually about in public spaces. Where do you have to get permission other than in the airport to shoot portraiture?
Okay, so that's another thing. The beauty of finding like beauty in everywhere and anywhere. A lot of these places are like near like dumpsters or like behind grocery stores or like places that you don't need permission. So, and I like to take clients to like not busy places. So I avoid like really prime time, like heavy busy locations, or places that you can tell where it is. So like you'll never find me at like the ledge grounds in Edmonton or like places where people shoot a lot, because I don't want you to be able to detect like where exactly it is. So a lot of times I'm like driving around and scouting like in like random fields, like I said, behind grocery stores, gas stations, like you name it, to find like weird little nooks like this. Like there was a garbage bin not far from here, but of course with like placement and whatnot, we could turn it into something nice. But usually I'm not like editing out like pipes or doing anything like that. I'm just trying to find like obscure little areas that have enough of what I need there. But of course, some set designs are like more expensive than others. Like this was just an empty like cement room that we styled up for a workshop. So we literally brought in like the bed, all of these things, the candles, the plants, the rugs, you name it. So depending on what you're doing or like your purpose for the shoot, you have the ability to take it in this direction as well. But don't look at this stuff and think like, oh, well, yeah, they have a cool bedroom. You're so lucky. It's like, well, actually, like we set it all up and styled it. This may look like a simple shot. I've shared this on Instagram before, but this is actually, and it looks like a bedroom, but this is actually my kitchen. So this is in my dining room. This is in my new house. So for this shot, I had to bring the mattress downstairs, bring down side tables, style the side tables, and obviously the bedding. But I had a particular thing I had to shoot for it. So my bedroom or like studio space wasn't ready, so I shot it here, but this is literally in my dining room. So, and I made a reel of it too so that people could see, like, obviously it doesn't have music in this one, but the reel's on my Instagram. But that's what it was previously. That's before styling. And this is the heaviest mattress ever brought down. And it's just so important for people to see the before and the process, and to know that like anybody can do this. Like it doesn't make me any special or whatnot. It just makes me really sweaty before shoots. I've even made like a dirty river location into a studio spot. But yeah, this was an important shot to show too, because I shot this with the tiniest, like smallest window, but because I had proper gear and I knew how to work with my lighting, I knew that I could shoot a moodier session and still have like clean files and properly execute this. But this is literally in the smallest bedroom, the really small window light, and I was still able to photograph a couple there.
We have a question here from the previous shot of your maternity shoot. And the question is, for this picture, did you find the spot first and then go find clothing to connect the tones? Because you had kind of like a nice tonal quality, or was that just happenstance?
So I was wearing that outfit and I was with Jana, who's like my best friend and hair and makeup artist, obviously. And we were saying like, oh, it'd be so cool if we could find a spot that like went with my outfit. And we were like looking, and we literally were walking down a back alley after getting pizza, which was like my like 8th meal that day because I was pregnant. And we saw that spot, and she was like, oh, but the pipe's there. And I was like, no, I can Photoshop that out. Like we can make it work. And we looked around the building to see if any more of those vines were there, but there weren't. It was just, of course, in this like dingy little garbage spot. So just a little bit of TLC and we made it work.
Excellent.
Yeah. This is a shot with one side window, and it turned like, all the above hotel pot lights off for more of a studio feel. So sometimes if you're in a hotel room or if you're in a client's space, you have to just play with their lighting a little bit to see what will work for you. I think a lot of clients assume more lighting the better, but depending on what you're trying to achieve, that's not always the case. So that's why I shot this one, to give it kind of that look. And it's important to have fun with your spaces too. This is up against a super boring like brown wall, and it had like a weird like decal like near her waist that I didn't want to shoot. So I knew that I wanted to shoot uptight, and initially what I had in my brain was that I was going to use a prism to make it look like a window sheer, because if you put a prism in front of your lens, or even a bit of your hair or fabric, you can get like this like glowy haze. So I was going to do that, but then the way it caught the light, it created this like rainbow effect, which was like a happy accident. So I did that and created that over her face to create more of an interesting look. But again, if you're trying to create more of that studio feel, playing with prisms or different things in front of your lens can give you that look too.
There's another question asking if you do any editing on, I think it's supposed to say lighting, Do you ever adjust lighting in your editing?
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes if like, you know, you could be shooting like a beautiful sunset, like there's the odd time I'll add like more defined streaks of the light, or like, you know, I change the color tones of sunset or sunrise often. I show a lot of pinks and blues in my portfolio. Um, it just like colors I'm drawn to, so I'm usually playing with the color tones of it. But yeah, definitely. Um, I might like try to enhance it a bit as well. Just be careful that you're not trying to put in like, because there's lots of different software where you can actually like add in a sun or anything like that. Just be careful that the lighting makes sense in the overall image when you're doing that, because you don't want it to look like them not to have like streaks of light on them at all, or for them to look very flat and then there's like bursting sun beside them. So if you are going to adjust lighting like that, just be aware of the overall image when you do that. Other factors that can help with like making a studio is props. I get asked a lot if I bring props to shoots, and I don't. I usually try to work with what's in the space unless I'm like styling and setting up the studio. So I try to work with what I have there. This one, we were wanting them to look like they were cooking breakfast, but we realized we had all drank our coffee before like making sure there was coffee in this like kitchen. So we actually used molasses and put it in like the coffee pot to make it look like coffee. And then I find with props, like a lot of people will have props there and have like a bowl or a batter or anything like that, but not show like the actual food or that it's messy or anything like that. So I got them to actually play with the food to make it look more realistic. Because even if it's a prop, I don't want it to look like a prop. So that's the same thing with that Christmas shoot that I did. I actually like made the hot chocolate and made the, you know, marshmallows with like chocolate shavings and everything, because I just didn't want them holding up mugs. Because again, if somebody holds up an empty mug as a prop, they'll even just the weight in their hand, they'll hold it not in a like genuine way, or they'll kind of like get caught up in posing. So I like them to have the weight in it so that it's more realistic in like their body language and how they would move. You know, props can even be nature or like trees or anything around them. More examples of nature. This is my backyard. Just kidding. This is Portland, like a rose garden. I wish.
I was gonna say Edmonton. Wow.
Yeah, that is not Edmonton. I wish. More innocent things like ice cream. You know, I always try to get clients to be super interactive on sessions. So they were like, I was like, what do you like to do for fun? And they were like, oh, we like going out for like date nights. Like, what's a date night that you really enjoyed or that you want to do? And their first date was getting ice cream. So we recreated that and used ice cream as props. Books. Most people have them. Look at how many books are behind you right now. You have so many.
This is the camera store book nook that I'm sitting in, so it's our full book selection.
So cool.
Lots of amazing photographers behind us, yeah.
Yeah. Even toothbrushes, like again, this is like everybody should check out bathrooms and like being able to shoot in them. There's so many. Every time I go to like a restaurant or like a new building, even if I don't have to go to the bathroom, I check the bathrooms to be like, is this a cool bathroom? Like, would I want to shoot here?
So garbage dumps and bathrooms, garbage bins and bathrooms.
I'm like, hire me. I'll take you to the coolest places.
Find the 7-Eleven. Let's go.
No.
Love it.
Thankfully, I know sometimes people have to be like, I like FaceTime with them prior to be like, I'm not a murderer, because I'm like, meet me at this 7-Eleven. So I'm very glad people trust me. Even like pillow fights, they can be used as props, but just be prepared. Feathers are so messy, and you only need one pillowcase. I made the fatal error of like getting 3, not knowing like how many feathers are in a pillowcase, and I was cleaning it up for weeks. Animals, again, here I shot this like 1.2. I was focused on her face, but she was at the same kind of like level with the dog, so the dog is pretty razor sharp too. But again, this field, they laughed at me because this was at their family property, and it was all like lots of weeds and like random cows around, and I was like, this is beautiful. And they were like, okay. But it was like, to me, it was beautiful. And again, if you're working in a studio situation where it's like a backdrop or wall, whatever, and you don't have like lots of props, you can use like the client's hair or their clothing as props, their body language as props. Hair is like the easily accessible thing to like touch and not feel awkward. You can literally just be like, oh, like pretend you're fixing your hair, and all of a sudden it's like a fashion shoot. Or even pizza. We were shooting for a long time, so I ordered the clients some pizza, and they were eating it, and they were so cute, and I was like, who looks this like adorable eating pizza? I don't.
I was gonna say, you have some very
like,
good-looking clients. Like, wow.
I know. Somebody asked me once, are they all models? I'm like, these are real people. Like these are real people. I don't know how they find me, but they do. But I do. I mean, I attribute that to like, Jana is very good at like hair and makeup and what she does as well, and like, proper lighting, all those things too. But yeah, they looked adorable eating pizza. So I was like, I'm just gonna photograph you eating pizza because I don't look like that.
We have a question
Yeah,
here actually from Haley about when you are indoors and you don't have a window, what are you using for your lighting for situations like this?
That's where I would bust out the ProPhoto A10 and the click box. So they just came out with this like smaller, like versatile click box, and it's so awesome. You can literally take it off the stand and handhold it, or you can put it on a tripod. And it's also a continuous light. So if strobes are nerve-wracking for you, you can use like a ring light, or like that click box is beautiful. And it's really soft, and it's a great size, so it's not too big. But that's a great one. Like if I was in an indoor situation, that's the setup I would use. But for this shoot, there was a window, but it's important to have stuff on hand just in case you're thrown into a situation like that. I randomly shot a wedding before I had lighting, and the getting ready was the only location I didn't check out prior because it was at a hotel, and it was at this one particular hotel in Edmonton that's off Gateway, that if anyone shot there, they know what I'm talking about. Is it a Sandman? I don't know if it's Sandman. I don't, but it's a huge hotel, but the inside rooms, it's almost like a square, and the inside rooms that have windows, the windows are like of the inside of the hotel. So you open a window, and it's not like there's a skylight like big in the hotel, but it's not, the window isn't like a proper window. And that was such a good lesson for me to learn, to not just like hope on a whim and a prayer I can make it work with whatever, because I had to rely off hot lights and like artificial light in the room, which obviously like you can adjust with color temperatures and all of that stuff too, but it was a nightmare for retouching. It took so much longer than it needed to, that I was like, I will always now be prepared with, or like, with lights, with proper like gear in case I'm in that situation again. So don't put yourself in that situation if you don't have to. This was still another prop example, more ice cream. And this was, I remember I showed her earlier on, in the slides. Again, I was literally just turning her to create different lighting. Again, this is all natural light and shot with one window, but the way I framed her, and I even like put the blinds down a certain way, got this like sliver of light that like you would like, anyone who's looked at this photo that's a photographer has told me that they would assume that this is a studio light, but it's just window light. So the biggest thing, I think for most of us that's holding us back is yourself, and not getting caught up in like what you don't have or where you're limited, versus looking at the glass, a different way and seeing like what you could make of a space, or say you only have a window, or you're working in a room that doesn't, like what can you do to make it work for you? So there's so many things you can do, whether it's creating it yourself, seeking out places, you don't have to go to dumpsters. You can go anywhere. But not saying no to checking those places too. But lastly, aside from like opening your eyes and seeing the possibilities that can exist within different spaces, I think it's really important to let you know that there is space for you, whether you're seasoned, whether you think you're too old, you're too young, you're too new. There's maybe you live in a really oversaturated market. It's so important for you to know that there is enough work out there for you, and that you just have to start. And going to like the camera store and asking for advice, renting equipment, trying to learn as much as you can. Great place to start. But at first I didn't have a lot of support and I was really nervous, and I'm really grateful I had a few people in my corner that can help me, because I know this industry can be lonely and really intimidating, but no matter what, there's space for you at whatever level you're at. And that's it. So thank you for listening to me ramble for so long. I hope that was super helpful, and I'm here if you have questions.
We do have some more questions. I was trying to save a few for the end, but we have some great ones. And of course, add as many as you guys want. We'll try to get to as many as we can. But yeah, why don't you stop sharing your screen and then we can see you a little bit better.
Sure. Yes.
But yeah, some fantastic stuff. And I love all the comments. There's some people here that are just thrilled with some of the tips that you've already shared. Lots of great advice. So question from Justin. Just curious what your favorite focal length is for most of your portraits. And if you have trouble framing with a certain focal length, do you change lenses or do you move yourself, change the scenery? What do you do?
Yeah, so I almost always shoot with a 50. Like the 50 is my favorite focal length. But of course, if I'm in a situation that's just not going to work for me, then I will switch my lenses. I try not to switch lenses as much as I can, because then it kind of gets me out of the zone. But the alternative to that is sometimes if I'm shooting something and say like the lighting's not working for me, or I can tell that the client's nervous and they need a break, I'll use it as an excuse. So I'll be like, oh, I'm just going to change my lens, and like I'll play with my tilt shift for a bit, just so I can go to my gear bag and kind of take a few moments to like give them a break. But yeah, I would say my 50 is like on my lens the most. Or
the nifty 50.
The nifty 50.
That's what we always call it around here. We love it.
Yeah.
Another question here is, do you shoot directly at your subjects, or is it better to shoot a little bit above your subjects? And I think what they're probably getting at is in terms of creating like flattering angles and things like that.
Yeah. I almost always shoot a little bit above. And not only do I think that's more of a flattering angle for anyone, but I also just want to show clients a different version of themselves. So I say that because if you were to go into a mirror and look at yourself, you're going to see yourself at eye level. And it's just a viewpoint you're very familiar with. So I like to show them different ways of themselves. So I find shooting above or even really low, it sounds wrong, but it can look really cool, is just like more interesting than eye level.
Okay. And then another question about lenses is, what are you meaning by 1.2? Is that the lens, or is it an adjustment in your camera settings? Very good question.
Oh, so there's different aperture settings that you can be using. So a lot of people, or a lot of lenses start at like 2.8. Some of them go up to 1.2. So I guess you would say like it's like how wide you're shooting, and it always sounds wrong because it feels kind of backwards, the language people use. So sometimes I confuse artists when I talk about it, but that's like the setting that I feel the most comfortable with. I like to have I like to be intentional where I want the viewer to look. So I find that I'm more in control of telling the story if I put a razor sharp focus on one spot, and then like I want them to go there and then kind of go everywhere else. So that's just like a personal choice, but some people love shooting at, 4 and above, or 4 and below. I would say I get confusing even saying it. Like but 2.8 is a pretty safe space to start shooting at. It does take a little bit of like skill to be at 1.2, and I don't say that to be like a jerk or sound like I'm bragging, but it's harder, it's easier to lose focus at 1.2 for sure.
Awesome. And there's another question that's kind of a follow-up to it about in your images, are you creating that blur effect or that softness in camera with the lenses, or are you doing any kind of blur effects in post?
So it's always in camera with the lenses. So on the ones that you see a lot of blur, that's me using the tilt shift. So that's where those lenses are so fun, is because they get really cool like lighting effects. But sometimes I find if I'm in a location that feels a little like meh, if I throw in the tilt shift and I can like blur it out, or like it does a really cool effect on like trees and on certain buildings, or of course like on like a wedding dress, you can get that really beautiful buttery blur. So if you see really, really blurry images of mine, then that's the tilt shift effect. But you can create that effect with different software. But I think when you have a tilt shift, you can tell if it's a lens or if it's post.
Sounds good. I'm going to come back to some of the chat questions, but I had some questions that were actually emailed to me before the event. And one was from Doug Gear in Calgary. Thanks so much for sending a question in advance. Wanted to discuss power supply gear that you use in your remote locations. So how are you handling power when you might not always have a plug-in?
So a big thing I think for destination photographers is like making sure that they're like fully prepared for all of that stuff. So when I'm shooting a destination wedding or anywhere that's like where I don't know if I'll have access to power, I always have tons of backup gear. So even in my bag, I think I always have at least 5 fully charged batteries. Like I'm not going to eat all those in a day. I'm not shooting lots of video or anything like that. But making sure that I have lots of batteries and backup memory cards is super important. With the Click 10, with the A10 and the Click softbox, like you don't always necessarily need power. There's different ones that are battery operated. I know like my flashes are battery operated, but I don't shoot a lot of like flash or like a lot of artificial light when I'm shooting destination work. And if I need to charge up anything, like I'll try to like pop into a cafe or like at least know where one's nearby if I needed it, but I've never been in that situation yet.
Question for Mallory. What are some of your posing prompts that result in such intimate but candid photos?
It's a great question. When I'm photographing people, I talk a lot. Like I'm very chatty, and I try to like break a lot of jokes. I try to like, I make fun of myself. I use like lots of like self-deprecating humor when I'm shooting. I just find that like talking a lot keeps people's minds kind of at ease, and pairing that with like, music really helps. But I'm very, very directive when I'm shooting people. So everything from their head to their toes to their fingers, like I'll actually be like, oh, just move a little bit of here, put your chin up, that's great. And I'm directing them the whole time. So I find being that way, not only does it show the client that I know what I'm doing, and it gives them confidence, because a lot of people who come to see me have never been photographed before, or they're like super nervous in front of the camera. But it also saves time, and it keeps the shoot running smoothly rather than waiting for your client just to turn into the right light or to move a certain way. I'll get clients into certain poses and get them to pose a certain, or set them up a certain way, and then I might get them to talk or to like sway or to dance or like do something from there that I'll get more candid reactions after. But I do a lot of directing to get them into that spot. But yeah, mostly like bad jokes like help a lot.
I feel like we could almost do like an entire another live stream or a demo at some point, just to hear some of those jokes. So if you guys maybe want to hear that, put in the comments below, send me an email, and we'll peer pressure her to come back. It'll be good. Okay, so what time of day is your favorite time to shoot?
Golden hour, of
Oh
course.
yeah.
Golden hour. I always love shooting just before sunset, at sunset, and a little bit of blue hour. So that like time frame is like money for me. Sunrise, like I've done it, but I find that I take time to warm up during a shoot. So typically all of my best shots are like near the end. And oh, did it cut you off there?
Oh, I'm still here, but I think my camera just died. But the people can will
Oh,
still be able to see me and hear me.
okay. Um, but yeah, so because sunrise works in reverse, where like all the dreamy lights at the beginning, I find that sometimes that's like it takes me time to warm up, so I work better with sunset for sure.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I think the audience will still be able to hear me. So, um, okay, so as far as social media goes, has that changed your approach to photography? Are you finding that you're more influenced than you were before? What kind of impact does that have on your work?
So I actually did a podcast with somebody recently about anxiety and social media, which I found very interesting. Because I'm kind of like in a weird place with it myself. I feel like social media can be a really great place, a fun place, but it can also be really difficult for creatives because it's a constant source of comparison. So I think as long as you treat social media, um, if you treat it in a way that's going to supplement your business in a healthy manner and that it makes you feel good, then it's great. If you open up social media and you have anxiety or you find that you're frustrated or it doesn't make you feel good or there's certain accounts that like just like take away that joy for photography
Mhm.
for you, then it's not a great place to be. So as long as you can curate it the way that it makes sense for you, that it's healthy, it's a great place to promote your work. For the most part, it's a free different platforms to promote yourself. So that's amazing. That's like something a lot of artists haven't had. But you just got to be careful because it can be a huge time waster, and it can be hard for like mental health stuff for sure.
Yeah. Um, in terms of the Canon R5 that you're currently using, are you primarily using eye detection for your autofocus, or are you sometimes just doing more of like a manual control of focus, selecting the point? You talked about sometimes focusing on like the collarbone, that kind of thing. So, what are your preferences in that regard?
So I do have it on eye detection automatically, but then when then I will manually change it when I want to focus on something specific. So whether that's hands or collarbone, shoulder, or even like some of their hair, um, then I will change it up. So it all depends on what I'm shooting, but the eye detection is great. So
Mhm.
like for weddings, I mostly leave it on that because they're faster, busier days, but I do change it.
And have you found that having eye detection and autofocus, the features of the mirrorless camera, has that sort of made your job easier in terms of being able to connect with your clients? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's because it's so intelligent and it's so good that it makes anytime the gear gets more sophisticated, it saves me time trying to figure things out. So the time that I would focus on trying to figure out my settings and do whatnot, now I can focus that on like making the clients feel comfortable. So a big thing for me is that I try not to have my head down looking at my camera too much or just like always be living behind my camera. I want clients to be able to connect with me. So I'll actually like take the camera away and talk to them a bit. And sometimes I'll even like be shooting like while I am talking to them because I don't want them to feel like they're just talking to equipment the entire time. So yeah, of course, it's made a huge difference for me.
What advice do you have for photographers as kind of an overall thing of how they can improve their work and just continue growing as photographers?
The biggest thing I could say is honestly shoot as often as possible. Um, Even when you're not feeling like picking up your camera, it's so important that to know that the more you shoot, the more you learn. And you could sign up for a million courses, or you could, you know, try to shoot a million different things. But if you're not shooting often, you're just not growing. So a big thing that propelled me into my career is that even on my like days off where I didn't have things booked, I would try to book like creative shoots, or I would try to shoot self-portraits, or I would on purpose put myself into bad lighting scenarios and practice, and then actually check my file size. That's why I would do like my print test and see like how far can I push my gear, because you don't want to find out the hard way after shooting someone's wedding and just like winging it, and you'd be amazed at like how many people do that. I hope not a lot, but there are people that do that. And you know, when you're working with clients, like them choosing to invest in you and hire you is a really big deal. So the more you can refine your skills, the more fun you can have. And when you're feeling good about your shooting ability, your gear's ability, it allows you to be more creative and have more fun, and to take more time with like prompts and shooting, or to think about all the extra creative stuff versus like just your technical aspects.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. This has been amazing. Can you let everybody know where else they can find more of your work, any of the other resources that you can share?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, you can find me. I'm pretty active on Instagram. So it's just at Nicole Ashley. So my name. I'm not on Facebook a whole lot, so I think I just have like an automated message on there. But Instagram is like the best place to find me. And then, of course, my website, which is www.nicoleashley.ca.
Perfect. Well, we've put that in the chat. And I, of course, want to thank Canon Canada again for sponsoring this event, connecting us with Nicole Ashley. It was something we were all very excited about, to be able to bring her on TCSTV live. And of course, I mentioned earlier that Canon Canada has worked with us to put together some special offers. There's been a couple of items that we've talked about, and so you might have the opportunity to get some cool bonuses and things like that. If you're not registered for this event, send me an email. It's evelyn@thecamerastore.com, and I'll be sure to add you to that list. And again, thank you so much to our TCSTV Live Dream team. Drew and Graham kept the show running, which is all that we asked for. And if you want to see more of what we do for TCSTV Live, make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell, or you can also check out thecamerastore.com under the events tab, and we'll catch you all again very soon.